one of the biggest challenges has been velocity. So if we look at the U.S. landscape, not just the U.S. landscape, even the Chinese landscape, honestly, the velocity is incredible. Right? How fast the companies move and how willing they are to move fast, even if it means they might completely fail. Culturally, this is a very difficult concept from a Japanese perspective.
Started. Hi, Laurent.
Hi,
Good.
See you.
Yes, so it's Memorial Day, right?
It is Memorial Day today, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming to this studio. It's a special studio today. We are kind of same area.
That's right. We're both on the East Bay of San Francisco. Always happy to see right now everything here in San Francisco and the East Bay is getting better and better over the last 2 years. So that's been very exciting. After the pandemic, we're seeing more people in the streets, more people in offices, more startups getting funded. So all of these are really good things. Well, we had a demo day in December of 2024, and we had another one in February as well. But our first one in Tokyo was in December, and I had the pleasure of being there for that demo day. And that was for the first batch out of our Tokyo hub, where we're taking equity stakes in those startups. So we've done maybe several programs in Japan that were non-equity programs through the Global Startup Acceleration Program. That's part of the Japan External Trade Organization, or JETRO.
I see. Thank you. So the reason why finally I could interview Laurent today is, of course, I attended your Alchemist Japan second demo day in February, and I was amazed founder's pitch. So tell us about yourself, Laurent. What do you do in Silicon Valley?
Wow. So I'm a managing director of global for Alchemist. So one of the things I look at is, as my thesis, is the United States needs international founders and international flow of ideas. That's what's made innovation in the States very strong, and we want to continue that. So we see a great opportunity right now, especially with great technical talent coming out of Japan, coming out of Korea, coming out of Taiwan, and even other areas like Malaysia and Indonesia and Vietnam. And we want to make sure that the bridges to the United States, both to U.S. capital markets, but also to U.S. business markets, remain open. So a lot of my focus has been on helping international companies get to the point where they're able to enter the U.S. market in a meaningful way. And we believe there's a strong bet to be made there, and we're excited about seeing that future.
So as a Japanese who came to Silicon Valley, I can understand many founders from Asia or other region, they want to go to US market. I want to know the reason, breakdown. So could you please tell us?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at the reason to come into the US market, there's obvious things. Size of market, access to capital. However, these reasons aren't actually good enough. And what I mean by good enough is they're the obvious reasons. Of course, you want to go where there's more money. However, some founders, and the ones that have a better ability to really start creating the relationships needed, they see a strategic reason to come to the US market. It's beyond just getting more customers, but it's actually creating the partnerships that allow them to help them make their business a global business, right? And there's a bit of a difference depending on where founders come from. Japan is the world's fourth largest economy.
Really?
Right? It's an incredibly strong economy. There's 130 million people. There's a strong small and medium enterprise sector. So for a Japanese startup founder, you can make a unicorn startup just focusing on the Japanese market.
Okay, so Japanese founder just focus on our country's market.
Exactly. They're able to make a unicorn or at least a successful startup, IPO, and so on. However, the challenge, I think, is expanding outside of that. And there's the right times to do it are different for different companies. For some companies, it's important to do that immediately. They need to start from a pre-seed time to start building the relationships here in the United States or another target market. The United States is definitely not the only market. For example, Southeast Asia, looking at Singapore can be a very appealing market depending on what your sector is. So what I try to come with a mindset when we're working with founders in programs is to have them answer the question, why is it that I want to go to the US market?
Yes.
Is now the right time for me to come to the US market? I don't know. Maybe it's not. Maybe they need more runway. Maybe they need more investment. Maybe their product needs to be adapted. And so market entry attempt too early or without preparation can be a very expensive lesson. All right, because the US market is incredibly expensive. It's very competitive. The sales motion is very different than in Japan or in Korea, just different challenges. So the founders need to be prepared to make that decision, and they need to prepare their investors at home about that decision as well. So we want them to come with quantifiable, hard data supporting their decision. It shouldn't be, I feel this, or in theory, this should work. It should be, we know that right now is the right time because there's no competition in the United States and customers have a giant need for a product. That's a good reason. And having those reasons unlocks the ability to raise capital, right? So it shows that there's an ability to get traction and to learn. So that's a lot of what I look at.
There are many companies, big unicorn company in Japan, but they are struggle to come to the US market. Tell us about your observation. Why many Japanese startups wanted to go to the US market, but kind of struggled, didn't super succeeded.
So there's something I like to think of right to play. Rakuten's a good example. Amazon's a giant competitor for Rakuten in the States. And there's been people that have tried to displace Amazon, more than just Rakuten, internal competition. Alibaba would be another good example. We've had Shine and Tebow coming out of China have really tried to encroach on that market. But that's a very, very expensive activity. And the velocity and the types of risks that you need to take are not well suited for an established company, right? Because the size of the bet becomes a very, very, very big bet. So that's one of the reasons for larger companies, I think, that have been a struggle, and why startups actually have better chance of success. And we're starting to see a big shift in the mindset of startup founders coming out of Japan. One of the biggest challenges has been velocity. So if we look at the US landscape, not just the US landscape, even the Chinese landscape, honestly, the velocity is incredible. Right? How fast the companies move and how willing they are to move fast, even if it means they might completely fail. Culturally, this is a very difficult concept from a Japanese perspective, not just for the founders, for their teams, for their investors in Japan, all the way along. And that we're starting to see a little bit of shift and a little bit more of risk appetite. However, there's another side that I see is emerging, which is instead of focusing on startups, as you mentioned, that are either B2C, B2B SaaS, where the market here is incredibly advanced and very, very competitive, to focus on areas where unique Japanese cultural values are actually strengths and not weaknesses, right? Or cultures can always be a strength or a weakness.
Yeah, both sides.
There's both sides. So when we look at areas such as health tech, material science, areas in deep tech, companies like Kyoto Fusioneering would be a good example of that. In bio is another area where we see some strong companies. All of these are areas where moving fast and breaking things is not good.
It's not good.
It's not good, right? If you move fast and break things with health tech, people die.
You are right. So have to be patient. Takes time, maybe 5 years.
Exactly.
I see.
You have to be patient, methodical, diligent in order to move forward. And yes, there's great US companies that are able to do this. However, what we see is we see very strong companies coming at the intersection of AI and healthcare coming out of Japan right now. Computer vision, AI in healthcare. We've seen AIM, Advanced Imaging Medical, Japanese company doing upper endoscopy, AI detection, getting some significant traction here in the US right now. We've seen some bio companies such as CureRips doing mitochondrial patches that are also starting through FDA approval process at this point. Cancer drug company Cortuck with a medical device as well on, again, focusing on hypoxic tumors. That's going through clinical trials here, is in phase 2 registrational, which means they don't need to do a phase 3 if they pass this, and could be ready to go to market in as little as 2 years. So all of these companies are really good examples of companies that have a strong right to play. Japanese research in this area is incredibly strong. The Japanese regulatory environment actually gives some of these startups an advantage in the United States. There's a very high level of regulatory rigor in Japan. And if it passes in the United States, the ability to go global with that is actually really big. So we see really, really great opportunities that can have tremendous impact on people's lives, have good returns for investors. Increasingly, my focus has been on these areas. Manufacturing is another area we're seeing as emerging. We're very excited about working with Japanese startups that are focused on the future of manufacturing. This is an area where there's a strong right to play. Japan already came into the United States in the late 70s, early 80s with the Kaizen methodology. A lot of what we do, even in startups with lean methodology, stems from Kaizen. These are fundamentally Japanese cultural values that it stems from, of continuous perfection, continuous improvement, continuous deployment. And that already transitioned US manufacturing once. We see that there's probably an opportunity to, as we're moving towards lights out factories, high degrees of automation, closed loop systems, and so on. There's great technology, great talent, and know-how in Japan. So the number of people with actual experience there is really great. And a big part of unlocking that is changing mindsets. And it's hard to see the international opportunity. And the talent ultimately ends up looking internal. Once they start looking external, we believe there's going to be some quite big opportunities.
So internal is like hiring talented, for example, AI engineer from Japan. And external means finding like local talent in here, like that.
Yeah, well, that as well, right? That's one of the areas, even just looking only at customers from Japan. And it's no surprise. It's much harder to get a customer outside of your country than in your country. For somebody from the US or from somebody from Japan or any place, it's probably 10 times the effort. It's not just a little bit harder. It's a lot harder. I don't want to underestimate that. But it unlocks your ability to solve problems on a far greater scale. So what we see is because people focus on the customers that are closest to them very deeply, they have a tendency to only look internal because they can make a successful company. It might not be venture scale. It doesn't mean it's not a successful company. If you have Toyota as your big client and it's very predictable, you probably have a pretty good company. In Japan, the customer is God.
Yes.
It's a common expression. The customer is God. Right?
Yeah.
And in the States, we do say things like the customer is always right. However, from a product standpoint or developing a product, we fundamentally usually need to have more than one customer. And we need to balance the requirements of a lot of different customers. We need to say no.
Need to say no to customer.
To the customer. That, we don't do this part of it. And a big struggle, and this is a struggle for all startups, but it's a special struggle for Japanese startups. They have the tendency to do consulting instead of building products.
Okay, this is interesting.
This is a huge, So,
Japanese company tend to consulting to customer.
To customers.
Okay, consulting means like listening to their struggling things, pain point, and then providing the solution.
Right. So that's we want to do this, but we want to do it in a manner where we listen to their intentions and we listen to multiple customers that look the same way as opposed to just one. So we want to gather that information, but we want to be careful about letting the customer lead your product roadmap, because you'll make a very specific solution for one customer as opposed to a solution that might be good for 1,000 customers. And so this is a big challenge with scaling, and it's a big challenge because if you raise money and at the course of 2 years you can show one POC for one customer, the runway is the amount of time after a raise that startup has before they run out of money.
Okay.
Right? So if you raise $1 million and maybe you have 5 people, your runway might be a year and a half.
I see. So calculation.
Right.
Budget.
Exactly, the budget. And what that ends up doing, it's cheap consulting, right? Because the consulting rate, they know you're a startup. They're able to negotiate a very good rate for themselves. You did a lot of work for them, very cheap. And that you might even get to continue doing that work. Maybe one time it goes away, or maybe you continue doing that same work for that same startup. But to get another customer, now I need another 5 people to take care of that other customer. So my scaling is linear, and I look like a consulting company. I don't look like a startup where my value multiples, so the amount of money generated per employee, right, is pretty low. Maybe 3 times expenses, as opposed to margins that would be much, much higher that we'd expect out of software businesses or even manufacturing businesses. So those become those real challenges that we find in the Japanese ecosystem, and where a cultural value that is good, listen to your customer. Absolutely.
Good.
Listen to your customer.
Yes.
Listen to many customers, and then understand what is it that's really missing, not what they're telling you to build, but what they can't even imagine they should be building yet.
I have a question.
Of course.
So Laurent, I come from 2 failed startups. One, the company who got $16 million Y Combinator from 2021. Yay! It was a startup to help local restaurant group. Anyway, they failed because of one, co-founder's problem, and hired wrong people who don't have experience, just like co-founders, Christianity friends, like that. And third, couldn't make revenue because of kind of same, didn't do great prioritize. That's why kind of a bug. So I joined almost last few months as a UX designer back then. And then, so even us, we couldn't understand who is our main customer, kind of bug. That's why they run away the money.
Right.
And
they
then
ran out of money.
Run out money, and then so how to sell this company. And next, I joined a Japanese middle-sized startup. I think 300 people. Kind of big, right?
It's big for Japan.
Yeah, and this company eventually failed because they launched in pandemic time to provide like a virtual office. So in 2020, it was great, but they didn't pivot. Now 2024, 5, no one uses it, right? So they could have a pivot, but they didn't because of they already have like Fujitsu or big customers, clients. And then they didn't prioritize, listened tons of kind of complaint or pain point, then didn't do great prioritize. So that our core product was kind of Zoom system using inside of the virtual office. But it was not great like stability, like sound weird like that. Eventually our client used like Teams or Zoom. So meaningless, and then we add like unnecessary function, like add more. Wow, overwhelmed. And then eventually they had to sell company.
And I bet you all those functions the clients asked for.
Yeah. So kind of similar as you mentioned.
And this is something that we see. We don't just see this in Japan. We see this in the United States too. All right, we see this. This is a problem oftentimes, and I think it's very difficult. I think we need to have the confidence of taking a new route. We're fundamentally trying to show a new paradigm that is going to unlock tremendous value for everybody involved, including the customer. And it needs to be, I think, quite a bit above and beyond what currently exists in the market.
Okay. The 3 key takeaways from Conversation with Laurent, Part 1. 1. Don't enter the US market without a real strategic reason. Laurent emphasized that just seeking a bigger market or more funding isn't enough. Founders need quantifiable reasons, such as a clear unmet demand or no competition in the US, before expanding. Timing and preparation matter. Otherwise, expansion becomes a costly mistake. Example, many Japanese startups underestimate the sales culture gap and burn resources too early. 2. Japanese startups often act like consultants, not product companies. Laurent observed that some founders over-listen to single customers, customizing features for each leading to consulting-style business with no scalability. Example, Kaori shared to startup failure caused by lack of prioritization and bloated future creep. Exactly what Laurent warned against. 3. Japan's strength shine in deep tech, not move fast and break things. While velocity is key in the US startups sectors like health tech, AI bio, and advanced manufacturing benefit from Japan's culture strengths. Precision, patience, and rigor. Example, startups like Kyoto Fusioneering and AIM show how Japan can lead in sectors where caution wins over speed. Okay, thank you so much for watching our episode today. We hope our conversation will help your future and career. If you like this episode, please give your like and subscribe it. Okay, the next episode is the conversation with Laurent Part 2. Please stay tuned. バイバイ、またね。チャオ